Chapter 1: The What Ifs and the Why Me's. Eventually, we all figure out that there will be some questions in this life that are never going to get answered. My reasons for those uncertainties started early. When I was only 6 months old, my biological father abandoned my mom and me. Whatever the circumstances that led up to his decision, the bottom line for me as an innocent infant was that I had been deserted by the first man who was supposed to love and care for me. When I was 2 years old, my mom married a man named Bill who she had been seeing for a while. He was twice divorced and had 2 older daughters from one of his previous marriages, but they never lived with us. To his credit, my mother's new husband took me in, providing for me as if I were one of his own. In fact, for years I lived under the assumption that he was my biological father. Bill worked as a deputy for the local sheriff's department, and a great deal of inherent stress accompanied his career. Most evenings, he would come home carrying the weight of the dark side of humanity he had dealt with on the job and go straight to the refrigerator to start his nightly marathon of beer drinking. After some particularly difficult days, he would stop at the local bar and have a few there before coming home to continue. Like so many people, Bill drank to medicate the pain of his open wounds. His work required an 8-hour focus on other people's problems and bad behavior. That is especially true for anyone who works in law enforcement. Often, maintaining laser focus is the only thing standing between them and death. But then quitting time would shift Bill back to his personal life, and his past failures and current faults would come roaring back to the forefront of his mind and heart. Mom had her own gaping wounds from her previous life and my birth father's abandonment. But neither she nor Bill ever talked about the past or the pain. Drinking and partying with friends, all in the desperate search for distraction, translated into a booze bash for birthdays, holidays, weddings, funerals, graduations, and sporting events. Any excuse to drink with others looking for a good time, but alcohol was always the guest of honor. Honestly, my mom was not much of a serious drinker, but she wanted to please Bill. So, wherever he went and whatever he wanted to do, she would follow. Being with him meant she was not alone and also meant she knew where he was, what he was doing, and who he was with. All these dynamics in our family led to many of the incidents that would have lasting effects on me. The lack of guidance and protection from my parents created circumstances like the ones I described in the introduction. I have to assume that the shame, guilt, and sheer shock of the crime committed against me silenced my ability to communicate what happened that night. There were so many horrible questions that constantly invaded my mind when my memory would be triggered. Thoughts like these came randomly. What if my parents had decided to consider my safety, putting me first, and just stay home? What if my mom would have told my dad to go on and she would stay with me? What if my dad had come to his senses and realized they could not possibly leave me alone with a teenage boy they did not know? What if I had managed to escape the house and go to a neighbor to call the police? What if he had been a boy who loved Jesus and showed me what genuine concern and care from a male could be like? The vicious cycle of assigning blame was constant. Countless times I asked God to erase those terrible memories and put an end to all of the what-ifs. But then those questions eventually ended up back at the forefront of my mind, my thoughts racing with the why me's. My nightmare experience as a little girl, coupled with keeping that boy's dirty secret, started me down a bad road of living in a constant mode of self-protection. In my heart, I was terrified of any male, especially if I did not know him. When I walked into my classroom on the first day of 3rd grade and saw my teacher was a man, fear struck me and stayed throughout that year. During my elementary school days, any time my parents planned their night out and the doorbell rang, if I saw a young man standing there to babysit, to say that I freaked out would be an understatement. Every time I begged and pleaded with them not to leave me alone with him. In sheer terror and with tears flooding my eyes, I grabbed my mother's leg and held on with a death grip, assuming the horror was about to happen again. My mind screamed, what if I can't escape behind a locked door this time? But my cries were dismissed and overlooked, written off as this little girl just being dramatic. Amazingly, those traumatic scenes never tipped my parents off to suspect something was actually wrong.